Jaira, I think I'm having a little bit of connection issues with the video.
Okay, we'll go on ahead and get started then. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Buenos dias, bon dia, and good morning to everyone in attendance today. And I welcome you to the third installment of the Talkback Tuesday Black in Latin America speaker series. And my name is Dr. Jaira Harrington, Assistant Professor in the Black Studies Department at UIC. I will serve as moderator for today's talk, The History of Slavery, Rights of Black Women, and Racism in Brazil, featuring our guest speaker, Gabriela Barretto de Sá. Here's the rundown for today's schedule. First, I will provide some background about the series. Second, I will introduce our speaker. Next, she will give her talk. And last, we will have open Q&A where comments in the chat will be acknowledged, and you can also raise your hand so that you can dialogue with our guests, and then we will close for the afternoon. So I would like to offer some background about the series. With support from the Programming Committee in Latin American and Latino Studies, Black Studies is hosting an ongoing speaker series on Blackness in Latin America for spring 2022. This interdisciplinary series features 5 scholars with expertise across Latin America, Brazil, Colombia, and Cuba. Each event will provide an opportunity for participants to explore the historical and contemporary narratives about Black communities in Latin America. Today's speaker, Professora Gabriela Barretto de Sá, is an assistant professor at Bahia State University in Brazil. In 2018, she was a visiting scholar at the University of Pennsylvania Population Studies Center and conducted field research on slavery in the Northeast and United States South. In 2014, she taught at the University of Colombia Law School. Her first book, written in 2019, A Negação da Liberdade, Direito e Escravização Ilegal no Brasil Oitocentista, The Negation of Freedom, Law, and Illegal Slavery in Brazil, addresses 19th century Brazilian cases of illegal enslavement. Professor de Sá's current book manuscript is based upon her doctoral research on slavery, Black women, and the right to memory. She holds a PhD in law from the University of Brasilia. Today, she will guide us through the talk, The History of Slavery, Rights of Black Women, and Racism in Brazil. Thank you, Professora de Sá, for joining us today, and we look forward to your presentation.
Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure to meet you today, to be here. I'd like to say thank you for the invitation. To start, after a while, I can explain more about the music video that we were trying to listen and to watch, but now I would like to start to present today the history of slavery, rights of Black women, and racism in Brazil. It's kind of short abstract about my research. I have been all my life during the university and master's and PhD researching about slavery in Brazil, slavery about the diaspora, especially in Latin America, in countries as Argentina, Peru, Bolivia, Ecuador, Cuba, yes, in Brazil and the US, of course. I have a problem to share my presentation. We tried, can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Oh, nice. Okay. So first of all, I would like to ask you, feel free to participate, please. I would like to ask you guys about what you know, anything about slavery outside the US. So anything about slavery in Latin America, about slavery in Brazil, when we talk about the history of slavery and Black women, do you remember, do you have any information that is connected to our talk today, please feel free to raise your hand or comment in the chat box. Well, Dr. Jaira, would you like to share something about what you know?
Yes, I have heard a lot about slavery in Brazil and Latin America. From what I've heard, this was actually the region that received the largest number of enslaved Africans in the world. Is that correct, Professor Gabriela?
Yes, for sure. So I was not looking at the chat box, and people wrote very important things. So nowadays in Brazil, try to comment a little bit about what they wrote. I know that there is modern day slavery. Yes, we have in Brazil in our criminal code, in our criminal law, a law that's a crime to maintain someone as a slave. So we have nowadays, it's very, to think about Latin America, it's important to say that in Brazil nowadays, Bolivian people is a large number of Bolivian people that come to Brazil trying a better life, and they go, I don't know how to say costura. Rosa Parks was costurar. Rosa Parks works as the woman who can make a quilt, who can make a clothes. How do you say?
Seamstress.
Yes. So nowadays in Brazil, for example, the seamstress job is, we have a lot of cases of modern slavery, and yes, in the prison system we still have, as US, Brazil has the most of the prisoners are Black people, are Black men. Also with police brutality, yes, we have talked about it in class in the concept of the transnational. Yes, so as you know, and as Professor Jaira told us, Brazil was the country that received the most part of all the African people that were raptured, sorry about my pronunciation, but during the transatlantic slave trade, any country received as many people as Brazil. And on the other hand, Brazil was the last country in America to abolish slavery. Only in 1888, we abolished the slavery in Brazil. And with my researches, and it's not a secret, you don't need to be a researcher to know that, including after the official day of the abolition in Brazil, that it was May 13th of 1888, after that day, a lot of people continue to be not legally as enslaved people, but they were maintained on the farms, still working for the old masters. So the reality of slavery in Brazil is very important to frame what the country is nowadays. And the difference between Brazil and the other countries is that although all those information during slavery or after slavery, we never had, for example, a black code. In some countries, in some French colonies, they have a code of law specific to enslaved people. In Brazil, it's like we never had slavery because in our laws, we didn't have any law talking specifically about enslaved people. And the same way, after slavery, after the end of slavery, we never had any kind of acts of trying to politics of reparation. So the problem of slavery in Brazil is still a reality nowadays. We in Brazil don't have, as you have in the US, a lot of, after the slavery in US, I forgot now the name of the project, but I know, for example, that in the Library of the Congress, it's possible to find a lot of interviews, a lot of archives with interviews of former enslaved people. In Brazil, we don't have anything like that. In Brazil, we don't have, for example, autobiographies wrote by enslaved people. So our history, this gap, this silence of our history here is very big. So although the fact that my talk today is about the history of slavery in Brazil, I would like to start trying to think together that we are talking about the Black Atlantic, we are talking about diaspora. So the author, Paul Gilroy, he says that it's impossible to talk about slavery in Brazil, about slavery in Cuba, about slavery in the US without connecting those realities. We are talking about human beings that were crossing the oceans, that were crossing the borders. So the history of slavery is an Atlantic history. That's why I put here this image, this painting of Keira Walker. I think that many of you maybe know her work, and you can read the name of the painting. And I think this painting is very interesting to show us this sense of nowhere, this sense of no world. After cross the ocean, we were all those people of diaspora. So to think about the connections between slavery in Brazil, in the US, and in the rest of Latin America, I like also to use the idea, the theory of Americanity, Americanidade. Americanidade is a theory developed by Lélia Gonzalez. Lélia Gonzalez is this woman who is with Angela Davis. And Lélia Gonzalez is very important in our history. She was a researcher, a historian, a sociology. She was from the sociology. And when she, what she was trying to say with this idea of Americanity, maybe you are familiar with this discussion about the name Latin America, including the name America. A lot of Latin American writers and thinkers, as Walter Mignolo, Henrique Dussel, and others, are always saying that America is not an original name, it's a name that is an heritage of decolonization. So in these efforts to try to rename the continent, we have a lot of theories in countries as Ecuador, as Bolivia, where the indigenous population has a very important political participation. For example, they usually call Latin America as Abya-Yala. That is an indigenous name for the continent. Other theories will call Afro-Latin America, as the professor, an example of this name, of this theory of Afro-Latin America was the professor Anani Dizienzo, that was a professor at Brown University, and he passed 2 years ago. And Lélia Gonzalez, in the same way, she was trying to give back the idea that what we have in this continent is full of the presence of Africa. It's not full of the presence of people from Africa. It's full of the knowledge of all the rich experience that African people experience in their continent. So to talk about Latin America, referring to this place as Africa, she's trying to give back this idea, to put in a positive way this presence of Africa in Latin America. Because sometimes when we talk about Latin America, the Black population, for the people who don't know a lot about the context of the region, people think, oh yes, Latin America is a lot of indigenous people, the Andean region, La Cordillera de los Andes, and some Black people in countries as Jamaica, Cuba, Brazil, Colombia. So the idea of Africa is to put together this experience of indigenous people, Black people in this nation that is not America as the Portuguese, as the Spanish colonizers baptized us. So Lélia Gonzalez is a very important thinker to help us to understand this idea of slavery as an Atlantic reality. So we all, doesn't matter if I'm talking with you from Salvador, Bahia in Brazil, we can go to archives one day and try to connect it, and we will find that we have boats and ships during the transatlantic slave trade transporting people across the Atlantic, across the Pacific Ocean. So we are all together in this history of slavery. The same way, when we talk about this reality of Black people, of slavery in this country that is Brazil, that, as I told you, we were the last country in America to abolish slavery. We were the country that received the most amount of people during slavery. It's obvious that in our culture today, we still have the mark of this history. We still have the mark of this ideology. And it's not only because we have a large Black population, but in our everyday relations, we can find that. In our everyday walking on the street, we can see that. And one of the examples that I want to share with you is about the monuments. When we had the murder of George Floyd, all the world started to talk about the monuments, how it's a problem, and the fact that the monuments in all the countries in Latin America, in America, is often was representing men, mostly of all men, that was involved with the slave trade. So in Brazil, more common than represent those men, it's very common to have streets, school, bridges, monuments with those men, yes. But also, maybe you have heard about the racial democracy. What is racial democracy? Our national narrative, our history of Brazil, the way that they found to try to say that slavery in Brazil was not that bad. So you can see still nowadays, the carnival in Brazil is very Black. You see Black people everywhere. So you can't say that it was bad, because what happened in Brazil, it was a racial democracy, because the Portuguese colonization was kind of sweet if we put in parallel with other realities. And we know that it's not true. So to maintain this idea of racial democracy, one of the ways they found was to celebrate the mãe preta. Mãe is mother in Portuguese. Preta is Black. So the mãe preta, the Black mother, she was during slavery a very important figure. She was the wet nurse. I know that you know what wet nurse is, but here in Brazil, they chose, the national narrative, the men of power, they chose this image of the mãe preta to represent the racial democracy. Like, oh, everyone here, since you're during slavery, when we were a baby, we can be breathing, how do you say?
Holly.
To amamentar.
Nourish, nourished by the wet nurse. So what you're explaining is how it is that wet nurses during this time would feed literally the children of future generations. And these are the Black women that were represented in these monuments.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Jaira. So using this image of that woman that was feeding all the population, still nowadays it's a way to say, see, we are all brothers, we are together. And this image is very problematic. It's not someone can think in a very, how can I say? Okay, someone can think, but it's not a right way of think that you're great to celebrate, to create monuments about Black women. No, it's not great, because if we look, none of those representations, I put here only 3 images, but if you come to Brazil, in most of the cities, you will find at least 1 monument celebrating this woman. But the problem is that because of the work that the wet nurse does, often all that monuments and paintings about wet nurse is trying to normalize, to put that is normal, that the body of the Black woman, it can be a little naked, because it's a Black woman, and the Black baby is always suffering. You can see in the 2 images, in the middle image and the other one, that the Black children, in the painting, the Black children is on the floor. In the other painting, on the monument, the Black baby is trying to reach his mother that is feeding the white baby. So those images, we don't understand that those images are celebrating Black people, celebrating our history. What those images are doing is trying to say that the racial democracy in Brazil was a good, it's a reality, because we know it's not a reality, and they say, yes, it's a reality. How do you know? How can I prove that it's a reality? Oh, I can prove it showing that we allow our white babies to be feeding by those women. But Lélia Gonzalez, that I told you before, she has a very important article talking about wet nurses, and she will say, okay, if you want to celebrate the work that wet nurses were doing during slavery, we should try to nowadays make politics to keep those Black babies from the poor situation that they lived. You don't live to go to the past and frozen this image of that Black woman body that is always ready to be used at some point by white population. And on the other hand, historians and the archives, researching with archives, we can find a lot of other informations about that wet nurse that show us that those women were not only suffering and doing the work that they were supposed to do. It's very common to find a lot of police information involving those women. A lot of times they were trying to find ways to don't feed the white baby, to maintain some milk, to feed, I forgot the word, but feed, it makes sense, to feed her baby. For example, it's very common, still nowadays in Brazil, if you have a baby and your baby is this, and you don't want anymore to, I forgot the word, your baby. So you can put chili or pepper, or pepper chili. So during slavery, it was very common that women try ways like that. And other ways, for example, yes, sometimes they killed the white babies, sometimes they do give alcohol like cachaça to those white babies to keep them sleeping, so they have time to run away, to take care of her community, of her family. So when we are talking about slavery, the history of slavery in Brazil and the Black woman, it's very important to have that idea in mind, that nowadays in Brazil is still common to celebrate this idea of the Black woman during slavery, not like the woman that was raped, not like the woman that was working all day, all night, but celebrating this romantic and false idea that the colonization framework that is still operating in the Brazilian society, that those women were included in the society. And for all that I tried to explain to you, is not true. So if I can clarify any idea, if you have any question, please let me know. So one of the ways that I, as a professor, I found to work about those images with my students, I'm a professor of law, was trying to use other languages. So in Brazil, in the Constitution, in the National Constitution, the most important law of our country, we have the, how can I say, it's right there that the university has a social function. Like the university in Brazil is not only for a few people that can go to the university. The university in Brazil, it's necessary, it's obligated to do a social work, a social job, and we call it extensão. I think the translation was extension.
Yes.
Extension. So as a project of extension, I started to work with my students on a project to question, to talk with the people of the city about one of those monuments of Mãe Preta that we have there. So we went to the streets and started to talk to the people. Hi, hello, hi. So do you know that these images represents a woman that during slavery, she was doing that, but the problem is that if you look, her Black baby is crying, she's naked. How many monuments do you know representing white women where they are naked? How many monuments do you know representing white babies that they are crying, that they are in pain? So it's not normal. Do you think that this image represents what you, a Black woman nowadays, is? And most of the people said, no, yes, I never think about that before. So after those small conversations along the street, we invited some women and their children to take photos. And with those photos, we made an exhibition, a photo exhibition in our Black History Month, that is November here in Brazil. So these, you can see the post, the publicity of this exhibition. And it was a very beautiful moment because we put the name of the exhibition, Luísa Marim e Luiz Gama, Luísa Marim and Luiz Gama, Refreshing Memories. And Luisa Maim and Luis Gama, they are in the other photo here. In our history, we have a very famous and unique moment during the 19th century that it was the Revolta dos Malays, Malays Rebellion, Malays Revolution. It was a revolution and insurrection, revolution made by Muslim enslaved people here in Salvador. It was a very important movement. If later you wanna try to research, we have a very good book wrote by João José Reis. So João José Reis is the author that worked with all the archives of the Muslim Revolution called Revolta dos Malays. And Luisa Maim, we don't have any paper, any archiving telling that Luisa Maim was involved on this rebellion, but her son, Luis Gama, that is the other, this photo of the woman is not the Luisa Maim. As I told you, we have a very important problem in Brazil with archives of slavery, so we don't have a photo of Luisa Maim. It's a photo when we need to represent Luisa Maim. It's common to use a photo of any Black woman that she was supposed to live during the slavery time. So this photo is just representative, but the man, Luis Gama, is the real photo of Luis Gama. And Luis Gama was Luisa Maim's son. And we know that Luisa Maim was a Black African woman that was in Brazil and participated of Revolta dos Malays. And because of that, she needed to run away and left her baby. And her baby was Luis Gama. And Luis Gama wrote about his mother, Luisa Maim. That's why we know that Luisa Maim exists. And until nowadays, Luisa Maim is a very important reference for Black women, for Black people in Brazil. And Luis Gama, I can say that Luis Gama is like our Frederick Douglass, because Luis Gama was son of Luisa Maim. She was an African enslaved woman, and Luis Gama was an African enslaved boy. And during his adolescencia, after his childhood, yes, when he was a youth, he started to read, and he became a lawyer, and he advocated for enslaved people. Luis Gama was also a poet. He has a book of poems. He was a very important man of our 19th century in Brazil. So using this idea of this family, during slavery, we put the name of the exhibition, Luisa Maim and Luis Gama, Refreshing Memories, trying to say that, okay, everybody, it's not necessary to keep saying that during slavery, Black people were suffering. No, we need to humanize the history of slavery. So if we're talking about human beings, we need to say that, oh yes, it's the essence of slavery is violence anywhere. Doesn't matter if it's here, it's in the mines of Potosí in Bolivia. But every day, people were trying to create spaces of freedom. And the spaces of freedom means a lot of different meanings. Spaces of freedom mean trying to maintain your family together, is trying to keep some food to your children, trying to have the right to celebrate, to dance, to sing. So it's very important to have this idea in mind, that all my work is trying to humanize the history of slavery. So it's not only necessary to look back and trying to open more sources. Not only the archives, we need to go to the paintings, to the writers of that time, what they were saying, to the photos of that time. We need to try to fill those silences, those gaps that we have in our history. So when we talk about this Atlantic history of slavery, I'm not here to talk about the history of slavery in the US, of course, but when I went to Montgomery, I was there to, of course, to know, to walk there, to know more about the civil rights fighting in the country. So it was very terrible to see this monument. This monument for me is the same. He's not saying anything about Black woman. You can read. But for me, as a Black woman that was researching the civil rights of Black people, what means that in the same place that I was anxious to be there to take my photo, because all my life I saw the photo of Martin Luther King there and all the people that arrived from the Selma's march there. So when I arrived there and I saw that monument, what it means, why until nowadays we have the presence of a man that we know he is considered the father of the modern medicine.
Gynecology.
Yes.
Gynecology.
Because he was being violent against Black women body. So it's not true, it's not fair. He can't be there. A few years ago, some time ago, a monument of him was took off of Central Park, but he's still there in Montgomery. So when we talk about Brazil, US, and the other countries, it's very sad to find that we have the same tradition to celebrate, to normalize violence against Black women. In the same way, how can we see the problems of that, the concrete problems? I'm not talking only about our right to memory, our right to history. I'm talking about the English violence, obstetric violence, violência obstétrica.
Yes, childbirth, reproductive violence against Black women.
Yes, we have a lot of research nowadays in Brazil that is saying that Black women experience violence when they are delivering their babies. So it's those representation, they contribute to maintain the Black body, the Black women body in this position of pain. So if we are talking about slavery and the rights of Black women, we should try to do something about those monuments, for example. The same way, when because of the silence about our history during slavery that I mentioned in the beginning of our conversation, we have in Brazil a lot of women that lived during slavery, but in the same way as Luisa Marin, that we don't have any proof, but people, the traditional history, the oral history, they say that she existed. So as Luisa Marin, another very important woman for Black movement, including for the popular Black Catholic religion in Brazil, is the escrava Anastácia, enslaved Anastácia. Maybe you are familiar with this image because I know that's a very emblematic image of slavery, and she is Anastasia. And there is a lot of versions of why she was using, wearing this mask, this iron mask. Some people say that it's because she was very rebel. She was always fighting against slavery. Other people say that because she was working on the sugarcane plantation, and it was a way to avoid the enslaved people to eat sugarcane, to eat sugar, to drink cachaça, that is the alcohol that is made from sugarcane. Other history says that she was she didn't allow her master to use her body. So as a castigo, how do you say castigo?
Punishment.
Yes, as a punishment, she was using this mask. But if you see, her eyes are usually represented as blue. So the history says that she was a very beautiful woman, black woman, very brave black woman with blue eyes. And since nowadays, this other image that you can see is a place to pray. It's like an altar.
Altar, yes.
Altar, yes. Because and this altar is in a church here in Salvador that is a church of black people. Because during slavery, black people was not allowed to go to white church. So we have most of the cities in Brazil, a church that was made, constructed by black people, enslaved people, and there was the only place where black people can go to mass, for example. So in Rio de Janeiro, the city of Rio de Janeiro, we have in the neighborhood called Madureira, that's a very black neighborhood, a church. It's not a Catholic church, but it's a community church, like a chapel, uma capela.
Chapel, yeah.
For Escrava Anastasia. So the image of Escrava Anastasia, although she's wearing the iron mask, black people in Brazil, assume her example of braveness. I don't know if it's correct to say braveness.
It's true, yes. Courageous, brave.
Yes. So it's a very important point of our history, the image of Anastasia and the power. If you trying to find more information on the internet, that is including prayers for Escrava Anastasia, oh my dear enslaved Anastasia, who were brave, who were beautiful, although all the pain, give me the strength, give me the faith, things like that. So, talking about cases in the present about the consequences of that violence against black women, another case that I suppose that you know something about was the case of Marielle Franco. Marielle Franco, she was a councilwoman.
Yes.
Councilwoman in Rio de Janeiro, and she was murdered, and we don't know who did that. It's a lot of investigation that she put some points of involvement of the president of Brazil and the people who are supposedly involved on the crime. It's a very mysterious history, yes, in Brazil. That's why the case is so famous around the world, because it's not only a case of human rights. She was very, very brave. She was queer, and she was always working for Black people, for minorities. You can see here Angela Davis, Conceição Evaristo, that is a writer that we will talking a little bit about Conceição Evaristo, and Benedita da Silva. Benedita da Silva is a very important politician in Brazil. When we wrote our actual constitution in Brazil is from 1988. Do you remember that I told you that the end of slavery in Brazil was in the year 1888? So 100 years later, we had the constitution that is still working in Brazil. And in that moment, she was the only Black woman that was there as a politician writing the constitution. So it shows how the space of Black women in the politics, in the civil life of our country is still on a place of not human recognized place. I can say that. So as I told you, Conceição Evaristo, that is this writer that was in the forum with Angela Davis and Benedita da Silva, she is trying to make some, the same way that I said that Luiz Gama, it was our Frederick Douglass, to try to give you more context to understand the importance of those people in our history. I could say that Conceição Evaristo is our Toni Morrison. Conceição Evaristo, that is this Black writer that only when she was 60 years, her books started to be recognized, and now she's like a star in the world. Everybody reads Conceição Evaristo, but as a Black woman, she was not in the famous writers. She was not in the lists of books to read because she was a Black woman from a slum favela in Brazil. In Conceição Evaristo, she works with the theory of escrevivência. What is escrevivência? Escrevivência is a word that she created using two words. The word write in Portuguese is escrever. So write and vivência. Vivência comes from viver, to live. So escrevivência, in the way that Conceição Evaristo works, means the right, the possibility of we Black people tell our history with our mouth, tell our history with our truth. No more other people telling about our history. So it's very important to know that this idea of escrevivência of Conceição Evaristo nowadays in Brazil, it's a lot of people in different areas. It's interdisciplinary. We are having interdisciplinary using of the word escrevivência for readdressing the experience of Black people in Brazil. So with this idea of escrevivência, Black women, Black people are feeling more confident to talk about their history, despite of the white method, the white logic say about our history and things like that. Here is a translation of a poem of Conceição Evaristo. I don't know if someone wanna read. Dr. Jaira, can I use your?
Sure, you can use my voice. Women's Voices, Conceição Evaristo. The voice of my great-grandmother echoed as a child inside the ship's bowels, echoing moans of a lost childhood. The voice of my grandmother echoed obedience to the white owners of everything. The voice of my mother whispered echoes of revolution of the very end of the others' kitchens under the trusses of white, dirty linen along the dusty road toward the slum. My voice still echoes, perplexing verses in rhymes of blood and hunger. The voice of my daughter, uniting all our voices, gathers within itself the dumb, silenced voices choking in our throats. The voice of my daughter gathers within it self-speech and action. Yesterday, today, now. In my daughter's voice, the resonance will be heard, the echo of freedom, life.
Thank you, Dr. Jaira. So this poem is just an example of how Conceição Evaristo works, how she's trying to tell our history in other way, give us the right to memory, the right to joy, recognize that even though we don't know anything about our ancestors that came on the ships, but we can feel this ancestry, and we have other ways to, including other ways to talk with those people that was inside the ships, the ships and the boats. Because if I'm not sure about how much do you know about Brazilian religions, but in Afro-Brazilian religions, as Candomblé, as Umbanda, we have, for example, in Umbanda, that is an Afro-Brazilian religion, we have like, I will call it spirits because it's not your rituals. It's another thing, because Umbanda is the religion that you need the religions that enslaved people bring from Africa with religion of indigenous people that lived here. So in the Umbanda, we have, for example, the spirit of the pretos velhos. Is like old Black people that lived during slavery in Brazil. So to call those spirits to come on the rituals, we have music, and sometimes those music is telling something about that history. For example, there is a music that we sing in the ritual for pretos velhos, those old Black enslaved people, the spirits that say something like, oh, I crossed the ocean and I was about to die, but Iemanjá appeared to me. So this experience of cross the ocean, you were about to die and then Orisha appears to you, is we can say that is an information about slavery, even though the white methods, the white logic will say, no, it's not a proof, it's not a document. But Black people in Brazil in the university now is trying to create another epistemology. So we are saying that because of the colonization, we need to be more open to the sources, to achieve, to reach those parts of our history that we don't know. So if a spirit that lived in that time is singing a song like that, yes, we will assume that is a proof, that is an information of slavery. And this information, yes, it is able to conduct and oriented to conduct our research. Well, so talking about Black women and the rights in Brazil, I told you that we don't have autobiographies, we don't have recordings of interviews with enslaved people or former enslaved people, but we have a very unique case that is the case of Esperança Garcia. Esperança Garcia was an enslaved woman that lived in Piauí, and in the year 1770, she wrote a letter to the government of the state of Piauí, and Piauí is this state here. You can see Piauí here. So you can see that Piauí is not on the coast, because most of all people are talking only about slavery on the Atlantic coast. So the case of Esperança Garcia, her letter was found on the archive of the state of Piauí. And this is the image of the archive, and this is the translation of her letter. We don't have time to read, but trying to be more quickly, what she's asking is the right to visit her husband, because she was moved for another farm, and her husband was didn't come with her. She was also asking for the right to baptize the children of the community and go to the church. And we can think, oh, that's sad. Why a Black woman is asking for the right to go to the church? The church is like the representation of the power of colonization. But researching about the meanings, what can be not saying when she is asking to go to the church? And one of the answers is that researching about slavery, we find that the moment of the stay in a mess is the moment that she's saying in the letter that she was suffering a lot of violence, she and the children. So if the children has marks of violence and they are at the church, people can see. So for enslaved people in Brazil during that time, go to the church was not only, oh, I want to pray, I want to confess. It's a moment to create relations. It's a moment to be seen. It's a space of possibilities that someone can help you. The same way the confession, other resources, we can find that not only enslaved people, they know everything in the society, they saw everything in the society. And most of the time is when they went to confess, they confess including crimes involving the masters. So if your master is married and he's using your body, you can go to the church and tell that. And it's not only information about you, it's information about that system. Another case, I saw that my master was having an extra case outside his marriage with the neighbor, things like that. So there is a lot of things that was possible to mean what her asking for go to the church mean. In the Carnival of 2019, she was one of the inspirations for the samba, for the music that we presented in the beginning of our talk today. And here you can see a woman representing Esperança Garcia holding her letter. So Esperança Garcia, Marielle Franco, Luisa Maim, all that names was mentioned in the samba of Mangueira that we heard in the beginning of the presentation. You can find on internet, Mangueira 2019 samba, to listen the samba, the music. And here I think that our time is almost finished. So just to finish, as I told you, the first, the law that abolished slavery in Brazil is the Golden Law from the year 1888. And 100 years ago, Black movements were on the streets calling that it was a false abolition. So you can see here is a pamphlet, a publicity that Black movements were trying to say, nothing changed. You can see an image of slavery and an image of violence against Black people. So there is a lot of continuism of the violence against Black people in Brazil because of slavery. Dr. Jaira, I would like to confirm if I have more time or should I stop right now?
Maybe about a minute to wrap up so we can invite some questions and answers from the viewing audience.
So I hope you can understand most of what, I said the word hope and I didn't mention that the name Esperança, Esperança Garcia, Esperança in Portuguese means hope. So it's very sad to see that Portuguese people, it was very common to put the name Esperança on enslaved people or felicidade, that is like happiness. So it's a comment to give you more context. So it's not easier to talk about slavery in Brazil in a short time, but I hope I can talk with you. I may look forward to keep talking with you. So if you have any question, please let me know, and thank you for your audience.
Thank you so much, Professora Gabriela. This presentation has been fascinating, and you have firmly situated Black women within the context of Brazilian history, within narratives of slavery, how it is that the resistance of Black women through the ages has pushed back against the narrative of racial democracy. And centering these narratives can give us a better understanding of freedom, of resistance. And we greatly appreciate your research and your work. Now I would like to open the floor for comments, questions, and reflections from the viewing public. And we'll take all of your questions. And I will note that at 12:15, some students have to leave. I'll just let you know in advance that you are dismissed at 12:15, but I'll take some questions from the viewers that we have here. Okay, we have some questions in the chats. Okay, there's a number of them, and I'll take them in reverse order, actually. What other significant changes in the Brazilian Constitution has made the lives of Brazilian women better? So there have been changes to the Constitution. There was mention of the latest edition being written in 1988. So what are some constitutional changes that have been made recently to improve the lives of Brazilian women and Black women in particular?
So good question. Thanks for the question. Can you see this image? It is a few articles of our Constitution that we can assume that is that can make life better for Black people, including Black women in Brazil. So it's the first time that racism is considered as a crime. So I think that it's great for Black women, for Black people in general. On the same time, it was the first time on our Constitution where the population quilombolas, that is the community formed of runaway enslaved people during slavery. So we have until nowadays a lot of quilombolas community in Latin America. We call it Maroons, Cimarrones. In Brazil, it's quilombola. So the Constitution give the right to the ownership of the land they call home. So you can't buy, you can't sell those lands. And the respect for intangible and tangible cultural heritage. The same way the Constitution say that you can't discriminate
Cannot
discriminates people because of being a woman or being a man. But we know that the reality and the law, it's always a challenge to concrete what the law is saying. So in the everyday life, we are still fighting to concrete, to bring to the real life those ideas of the Constitution.
Thank you, Professora. Another question here. Do you think that the work of Black women in Brazil has also been overlooked like it is in the United States? So maybe just speaking to your comparative experiences in both countries could help us think through that question.
Yes, for sure. And trying to connect our histories. Bell Hooks, for example, she will say that, I don't know the name of the book because I wrote it in Portuguese, it's Ensinando a Transgredir.
Teaching to transgress.
Yes, she was saying that for a long time we talk about slavery only on trying to understand the relationship between master and enslaved people. And we didn't take a special look for how white women was working to maintain the slavery and how white women was treating Black women and how Black women were every day fighting to dismantle slavery. So I told you about Luiz Gama and the other important names of our Black history. Most of them are men. So Zumbi dos Palmares is one quilombola, one cimarrón, that is very important for our history. So for a long time, the history of slavery was only focused on the image of the man and putting the woman in this place of the wet nurse, or this place of your poor woman that was used by the master. So as I tried to say before, that's way to tell the history. It's a way that's not consider the woman as a human. The woman is a human being, because a human being is not only crying, is not only suffering, and is not only fighting. We have the complexity of the human life. So nowadays we have a lot of more resources that is putting the women in their history of slavery, considering her agency and all their fight against slavery.
Thank you very much. We also have a question about modern day slavery. Why do you think it isn't talked about as much as it should be?
So in Brazil, a short answer is not uncommon. It's very common, for example, to find people working as enslaved people in farms that is connected to politicians. So it's the same history, it's the power, it's the money. So if you are poor, you are not brave enough to put someone in a slavery system as nowadays we have in Brazil. So most of the cases of the modern slave crime is we find those people in very big farms. So one more time, it's because all the power and the money of those land owners.
Thank you. And we have a question about research here. For researching the experience of Black Brazilian women during slavery, what archive material do you recommend looking through? So you spoke to how there was such limited information, but how did you manage your research given those conditions?
So we have in Brazil a problem with our archives. I'm not sure if you know, but 3 years ago, we have a very important lawsuit with our National Museum, the National Museum of Brazil. It was fired because of we didn't have the conditions to maintain that. It was an accident because of the gap of investment in our politics of memory. So we have a problem with our archives, but Some archives are already digitalized. You can find those archives on the internet. We have a web page called Hemeroteca Nacional. Hemeroteca Nacional. I can send the link to Dr. Jaira and she can share with you. It's like online places where we can find those documents that allow us to know a little bit more. The same way, the writings of the people who are traveling in Brazil, the paintings, we have a large amount of sources, the tradition of the oral history also for us that are here in Brazil. So we are saying nowadays that the problem, the silence of slavery is not because we don't have information. It's because we don't have information in the ways that the white history thinks that is the useful information. But it's a great job that we need to be brave to do.
Excellent comments here. Any other questions? And feel free to raise your hand to be acknowledged. Thank you for that reference here. Wonderful. Okay, well, we have a couple more minutes until the close of this session. I think that I will say, Gabriela, that I think that your research when you were in the United States was fascinating in that you saw so much of what the history was in the United States by traveling to the Deep South. And it's something rare to have the perspective of a researcher and scholar from outside of the United States to come to the United States and to see parts of the country that are very prominent when we talk about the history of slavery. But it's so rare to have that kind of connection with a scholar who does research in a country like Brazil to take up an interest in the long civil rights movement, an interest in Black resistance among those who were enslaved here in this country. So if you could speak a bit about your experiences doing that, the kind of transnational connections that you had, that would be really helpful, I think, insightful to us to consider.
Thank you for your question, Dr. Jaira. So to answer that question, I would like to share, can you see the image that I mean? Yes. So this first image, it was the first time that I went to the US. I received the scholarship of Brown University, and this photo was there in a cemetery, and I used those images on my PhD thesis, on my PhD dissertation. I told you about the idea of escrevivência of Conceição Evaristo, this act of tell our histories, not only with the grammatica, the grammatic, the
grammar, vocabularies.
Yeah. The grammar, vocabularies, but also we need to put on the ground this idea that the binarism is the mind and body and feel and think. So I wrote, I found information about slavery that I can't say. I think that I will die without be able to talk about some things that I saw, that I felt, that some kinds of punishments. So sometimes you need to be open to try to express yourself in different ways. So I didn't make the art, but I talked with an artist to do those images for me. So in this first image, I talk about my experience not in the South, but in Providence. it was very strong. This place, the cemetery where I am taking the photo, it was in the same tomb. It was 3 Black women from the same family buried there. And it's very sad because it says it was writing something like that, oh, Rosie, Philly, and Mary, 3 distinguished Black women that served with loyalty to master, no. That's why they have the right to be here in the cemetery of the family. So it was so sad for me to be there and saw that. So it's an example of the kind of research that I was doing during my time there. The other image, it was in the Davis Manor Plantation in Tennessee. Maybe you know that in New Orleans, we have the Winnie Plantation. Winnie, I forgot. Yes, the Winnie Plantation is not the common way of plantations. There we can see the agency, the history of the people, enslaved people that lived there. But the other plantations, like the Davis Manor, the woman that was the guide of the houses, she was not talking anything about slavery, and she was dressed. You can see that woman sitting there. She was a white woman dressed as a white lady from the 19th century, and always she was showing the kitchen. Oh, the kitchen, the plate is from England, from China. And I asked her, oh, okay, the kitchen, but who worked in the kitchen? And she said, oh, do you want to know about slavery? Here was not important to the slavery, but you can read the information. So this photo I took when I was in a small room in the house, in the big house of the plantation, where it was possible to read a few information about slavery. But the whole guys in the farm, they didn't mention slavery. The farm is arranged to marry parties and things like that. So this photo for me is very important because it was not easy for me as a Black woman from another country. I was in the US at this time. I was as a visiting scholar at the University of Pennsylvania, and I traveled by myself to do this research, and it was not in Memphis, it was in a most far place. So it was very hard for me to go there. And when I was there, I didn't find the information because those women, that woman, she was not there to talk to people like me. She said, oh, do you want to know anything? You can read that. So I felt it was a violence for me, all the way that she treated me. So you can see is a photo that I was afraid, oh, if she see that I am taking a photo of her, I was feeling fear and angry when I took this photo. So I think that it's helping to understand how the experience of being a Black woman from Brazil try to research those themes in places that the central idea is not to preserve the memory of the history of enslaved people. They were there to celebrate how the white woman were a good person, how the beauty were beautiful, and things like that. So maybe with those 2 examples, and I mentioned it before, my experience when I saw the monument of James Sims, that it was very sad. I have another photo that I didn't show, that I'm doing the same that Beyonce is doing on the video formation in front of the house. She's doing the hands up. I'm doing the same in front of the monument of James Sims, but I didn't use it here. I prefer not to use, but I didn't know what to do. It was not possible for me to put the monument in the ground, so I did that in front of the monument and took a photo. But I use this photo in my classes, but not here.
Thank you so much, Professora Gabriela. We are nearing the end of our time. I did want to, and here is, yes, I was going to ask you to do that. If you would like to get in contact with Professora Gabriela, here's her email address. Thank you so much. Just to put a bit of an advertisement for our next Talkback Tuesday, we will return to Talkback Tuesday on March 15th at 11 a.m. with Profesora Gigna Paola Mosquera, and the discussion topic will be Estamos Listos, Afro-Colombia and Centering Black Narratives. So please join us for the continued speaker series. Registration is in the chat box. We appreciate your presence, Profesora de Sá. We have enjoyed everything it is that you've had to offer. You've actually brought to memory some of our travels when we were looking at sites on the Underground Railroad, all of these monuments and memorials that at times we take for granted that exist in firm abundance. She made sure that we visited them. And I appreciate the kind of knowledge that she brought, the kind of experiences that she brought to a transnational conversation and dialogue around slavery, and always centering the narratives of Black women whose presence in these conversations had been muted, erased, and silenced. And so thank you for giving voice to these narratives, these histories, and we appreciate you and your presence. So thank you so much. And thank you all for attending. May you all enjoy the rest of your day. Take good care.
Thank you again. I hope we can